Because just this past weekend, we had Revolution, AEW's very first pay-per-view event of 2022, and it left a lot of questions that have yet to be answered. And I want to start off with the fact that most of my predictions, obviously, that you can go back and check on my YouTube channel, on this very YouTube channel, if you're subscribed to it, go ahead and subscribe. But you can check my predictions, and I pretty much predicted that Adam Cole was going to walk out still AEW World Champion, and he did just that. He beat Lance Archer, which, he beat the Murder Hawk Monster. He beat one of the top stars in AEW, and like I said, as soon as the Murder Hawk Monster was announced to be the number one contender, the AEW World Championship, I said it here, folks, he was not going to win the world title. He was not going to beat Hangman Adam Page, because Revolution just wasn't the moment to take the championship off of Hangman Page. And I was proven right on that fact. The issue now is, what does AEW do with somebody like Lance Archer? Somebody who's had multiple world title shots. Somebody who's had a TN title shot in the past as well. But every single time he gets to that big match, he seems to fail. He doesn't seem to get the job done. And that's become a recurring issue for AEW and for Lance Archer. And that is something that they have to work on, which is going to be very hard because, like I said, like I've always said in these shows, AEW has way too much talent to even think about what they know what to do with, especially with the recent addition of somebody like Swerve Strickland and debuting Jeff Hardy. AEW keeps adding up talent. They did so this past Wednesday night on Dynamite. Let's see what are AEW's next steps. What's Tony Khan going to be up to in this case? But one of the things that I wasn't correct about at Revolution was the fact that MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, was going to go ahead and beat CM Punk in that dog collar match in the pay-per-view. I sat here weeks ago, and I said, and I pledged, and I hoped that CM Punk would be one of those stars to never, ever beat MJF in AEW. Didn't matter how hard he tried. Didn't matter in what kind of match, what kind of stipulation. CM Punk was always going to be an opponent that MJF always bested. And Tony Khan had a different point of view on that. He gave CM Punk the win. And in my view, in hindsight, you could talk about anything. You really can. But in my view, that was a mistake. Because you want to talk about how wrestling fans hate the fact that WWE has 50-50 booking. One win for the heel, one win for the face, and then just see what happens. You don't really push anybody upward, you don't push anyone downward with that 50-50 kind of booking, and that's exactly what they did with MJF and CM Punk right here. MJF screwed CM Punk at Dynamite in Chicago, Illinois. Not once, but twice. And then CM Punk got his revenge. He got redemption. He got his vengeance at the pay-per-view. He beat MJF. So the real question here is this over? Is it all said and done? Will we see a third rubber match like the old times, like it should be when 50-50 booking happens? Will we see that? And all I gotta say is, after CM Punk beating MJF in this dog collar match, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in watching a third match between these two. I'm not. They had their rivalry, they had their feud, it was interesting, it was entertaining as hell. And yes, I know it sounds like I'm just bitching and moaning because I didn't get my way. I didn't get the fact that MJF was not going to beat CM Punk. Rather, the opposite, that CM Punk was never going to beat MJF. But, I had a whole booking plan laid out, and now MJF is kind of hurt. It's on a down low, on a downward spiral in what should be his upcoming world title match against Hangman Page at Double or Nothing. So we'll see what Tony Khan and AEW does right there. But like I said, I think they made a big mistake by giving CM Punk a win that he did not need. There is nothing, no one in today's internet wrestling community or in the wrestling world today that would have, would have been upset by not having CM Punk walk out with the victory. If CM Punk lost to MJF, everybody would have been fine with that. They would have. It doesn't hurt CM Punk. CM Punk is a legend, much like John Cena, much like Randy Orton. If they lose a match, it makes whoever beats them that much better, that much bigger. And these stars, they're already self-made. They're household names. Sure, he can't beat MJF, but you put him up against Jon Moxley. You put him up against Bryan Danielson. You put him up against Wardlow or Sammy Guevara or any of these young up-and-comers that you got in AEW, and it's still going to be a high-profile match just because it's CM Punk. So once again, I got to say, bad call on AEW's part. I'm sorry, but that's just what I think. We'll see how it plays out in the future. We saw Wardlow walk out of the Face of the Revolution ladder match. He grabbed that brass ring, and now he gets a shot at the TNT title. He gets a shot at the TNT champion, which at the time of the Revolution pay-per-view, his name was Sammy Guevara. But as you just saw this past Wednesday, and as you're going to see tonight on Rampage, new TNT champion Scorpio Sky will have some words. Choice words, as a matter of fact, since he's aligned himself with Ethan Page and Dan Lambert and America's Top Team. So, that wasn't at all a bad move. In fact, it was a genius move. Because now, with the events of Revolution and with the events of Dynamite, you're setting up Wardlow for success like never before. Because first, you're setting up Wardlow for a title match against an opponent that has an entire team, literally an entirely American Top Team behind him, which Wardlow can destroy with his Power Bomb Symphony and reach that TNT Championship and become the champion that we all know he will eventually, no doubt, undoubtedly, inevitably be at one point in his career. But not only that, his words on Dynamite, his actions on Dynamite, saying that things need to change, and he left MJF's ring on the apron and he walked away. It seemed like Wardlow was quitting or taking a break from the Pinnacle and taking a break from being MJF's main muscle and bodyguard. Well, there you go. You got Wardlow primed as a top babyface to go up against two of the baddest groups currently in AEW. And whenever that happens, whenever a badass like Wardlow has to go up against a group of people, it spells big money for whichever company it is. Because that just gets the fans to rally behind the underdog badass that they know can take care of business, that they know can powerbomb the shit out of every single member of those teams. But it's all a numbers game. They're going to eventually get the best of Wardlow. And we'll just have to wait and see. All I can say is Scorpio Sky's days as TNT champion are numbered. Because the night that Wardlow chooses to have his TNT title match, he will absolutely destroy Scorpio Sky. And the only exception, the only way I see that not taking place is if, like I said, the Pinnacle and MJF take this a little bit too personally, take his actions on Dynamite a little bit too personally, and cost him that title match, and then Wardlow gets to go up against the Pinnacle. Either way, the Powerbomb Symphony, it's set to continue very, very, very soon. And the final point I want to touch upon from Revolution is, yes, another part where I was wrong. I was wrong that Thunder Rosa was going to walk out the AEW Women's World Champion. She did not. She had to deal with a lot of interference from Britt Baker's allies. And that ended up costing her the match. That ended up costing her the championship. But the end result, no matter what, it's still going to be the same. The end result is still going to be Thunder Rosa becoming AEW Women's World Champion. And she's going to become AEW Women's World Champion by dethroning Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, no matter what. And that's going to happen. More often than not, I give you a 99.9% chance it's going to happen at St. Patrick's Day edition of Dynamite. Which, it's kind of poetic, just because just a year prior, they had that amazing lights out battle where they both ended up with crimson faces for masks, with crimson masks for face, excuse me. But this time, Thunder Rosa walks out the Women's World Champion, and then eventually you set up Britt Baker for a babyface turn because fans want to cheer her. The fans love Britt Baker, but it's Thunder Rosa's time. And that's all I got to say about that. I was wrong, but I was only wrong in the timing because the end result will be the same. Thunder Rosa will soon become AEW Women's World Champion. Those were the main highlights from Revolution, from Dynamite this past Wednesday night, at least in my point of view. Not a lot of other things happened. I mean, Jeff Hardy did make his debut on Dynamite, but that's something we covered a few weeks ago. He wouldn't make his debut. Now he's a part of a tag team with Matt Hardy, and we get to see that run that we got in the WWF, that we got in the WWE, that we got in TNA, that we got in Ring of Honor, that we got in WWE, and now we are getting it in AEW. And to be honest with you, no matter how hard they try, they are never, ever, ever going to be the greatest tag team of all time. That moniker, ladies and gentlemen, is reserved for a team known as the Dudleys. Team 3D. They won tag titles everywhere they were ever a part of. And AEW came after them. So what? Big whoop. Jeff Hardy, the most I can say that I'm interested about your AEW run is you encountering CM Punk once again for the first time in almost 13 years. 13 years ago, CM Punk and Jeff Hardy had one of the greatest rivalries, one of the greatest feuds, not only in SmackDown history, but in WWE history, in my humble point of view. And if they reignite that rivalry in WWE, it would take CM Punk turning heel, though, which I'm not opposed to. But it would be something that I am highly interested in, just because that's good shit. That's good television that they're about to put on TV. But for right now, Jeff Hardy's going to be possibly future tag team champion in AEW along with his brother, which, last thing I'm going to say about this. Last thing I'm going to say about Jeff Hardy. I love Jeff Hardy. You know how I feel about him. You know what kind of comments I've had about Jeff Hardy in the past. But if the Hardy Boys or the Hardys end up winning the AEW World Tag Team Championships before Proud and Powerful do, I'm going to be pissed. So with that said, those were my thoughts on Revolution. Those were my thoughts on Dynamite. We got a lot to look forward to tonight on Rampage. So leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions on the comment section below. What do you think about Revolution? What do you think about what happened on Dynamite? What do you think is going to happen tonight on Rampage? Leave them in the comment section below.